member to the chamber will from the House. He was leading the Ahwatukee Chamber, so thank you very much. Before, just quickly go off script for 1 second, I want to thank a few of our partners. Chad does an incredible job, but we have some partners in the community who are extremely important, and I know that we couldn't do the job we do without them. And so ATRA is one of them. Kevin McCarthy, our spiritual leader in all things tax and fiscal. Probably forgotten more about tax policy than everybody in the room besides maybe Gretchen Kitchell. I would be remiss if I didn't mention my good friend Glenn Hammer. He has been a tremendous leader at the state capitol and a very important ally for the chamber, as well as GPL, Tom Friends, and Lisa Atkins. The other group that I think has been a tremendous partner for us is the ACA, Sandra Watson, and her team. Expect more with Pearl Chang Yisao. And for those legislators out there, don't forget your local chambers. They're really doing a lot of work at the sort of the grassroots level with those small businesses. We're a small business state. We're not a Fortune 500 state, and we have to support small business, and they still struggle. They still haven't recovered, and these chambers are doing the dirty work day by day to try and make sure that those chambers are growing, and they're trying to provide feedback to you at the state capitol in terms of what's important to those small businesses, so listen to them, and I can tell you we do. We certainly support the work that they do, so I just want to send that out to them, and thank all our partners in the room today. I think Kevin is here, so Kevin, thank you. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, Jaime Molera. Jaime was born and raised in Nogales, Arizona. He grew up in a close-knit community on the Arizona-Mexico border where he developed strong values, which served him well in his professional life. He's one of 4 boys raised by his mom, who was a school secretary. And Jaime learned early on the value of hard work, honesty, character, and integrity. And I told him, by the way, you all saw that our friend Pope Francis made 2 popes saints earlier in the week, and I said there was a little-known 3rd saint that was Jaime's mom, and that was because she had to put up with him and his 3 brothers. So with that, please welcome Jaime Molera to the stage.
Thank you, Tyler. Good morning. I just wanted to say before, and let me do this. Let me have the panelists go ahead and come on up here, and I'll introduce them as they come up. So one of the things I want to say is they're making their way up to our stage, that the Phoenix Chamber has been a tremendous leader in not only business issues, but as you all know, in public policy in general. And I think we owe Todd Sanders and his team another round of applause for what they've done for us. We have a lot of questions to get to, and real quickly I want to introduce our panelists, our esteemed panelists, as most of you know who they are, of course. But Andy Tobin, our Speaker of the House from Legislative District 1, he was elected first in 2006, and he's been Speaker since 2011. Our President, Andy Biggs, from Legislative District 12, was a House member elected in 2002 until 2010, been in the Senate since 2011, and has been President since 2013. And of course, we have Jana Day, who's the managing partner of Brownstein Hyatt, Farber and Schreck. Jana, as you know, is one of the best legal policy minds in the state. And we have Scott Seeley. Scott and I work together in the whole administration. Scott is, in my opinion, one of the best political strategists in the state. So just a quick round of applause for our esteemed panelists. So panelists, I want you to know that anything you say today is off the record. So you can be as candid. You can let expletives fly. It doesn't matter. So I want to start off with our leaders, President Biggs and Speaker Tobin. President Biggs, with you first. Can you just provide a very brief highlight of what you believe for the business community you would see as maybe the best thing that happened, or maybe the worst thing that happened?
Well, I think nested in the best thing that happened. The best thing that happened is that we were able to overcome whatever discord that took place in the legislature last year to get out within 101 days and get a budget that works. And but nested within that budget was a tax package that I think is, I want to say $35 million roughly in credits and incentives, and I think that was probably a highlight for the business community.
Mr. Speaker.
Yes. Okay. I think a lot of the concentration that we've had now over the last several years is maybe changing what Arizona's brand is, and especially as it's perceived throughout the country. And with the budget process that we went through, and the to develop a list of all those things that I'm sure we wouldn't hear about. And, you know, we're opening an office down in Mexico City, a trade office in Mexico City. You know, the world doesn't see that. And that happens because of folks like you and your attention to the legislature, and your attention to leadership, and ongoing goals, and what we want to create for this brand. They're our largest trading partner in period. And this effort to go ahead and extend that hand, true commerce, you know, how do we benefit from each other? I think is huge for us. And as you start going down the list of things that we've got, the victims' rights legislation, breast cancer awareness, suicide prevention, these are a lot of the things that, and the list goes on, that you're not going to hear about in the press. And the reason I mention all of them, and that maybe they weren't in the top list of the chamber's priorities, because you pretty much know you have a legislature that's really working very closely with the small business community and the chamber. I just share that with you because I see these as parts of Arizona that a lot of the rest of the country don't see. So as we go forward, we talk about, you know, what Arizona's brand is, who we are. That's good stuff. Oh, I guess.
Should I start all over again? So, and HERF money was it. So in case you didn't hear it. So
Thank you, Mr. Did
Did that work?
I think that worked.
Okay, so you all heard me in the back of the room. It's Arizona's brand. I think Arizona's brand won this session, and I think it wins going forward.
Thank you. So Scott, let me ask, in your opinion, being with the chamber, what would you see, based on this discussion of what happened, going forward? We're going to have a new administration next year, a new governor. What would you say would be the most significant issues we have to address by the business community in Arizona to make us more competitive, to get us the jobs over the next 4 years?
Yeah, I agree with the speaker's observations there about branding. Branding is important. Maybe in my career it's been over important. Occasionally you have to have substance too. But you need to be able to make the pitch when you travel around the country. Participated yesterday, some of you may be as well, in a economic development breakfast, and it's always great to hear where we are in the number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5 in economic climate, in job creation, and so forth. But then we have big companies making decisions that don't necessarily see. I mean, brand-wise, we're not identified in that 2nd, 3rd, 4th position when they start making big decisions. One of the big ones recently, and this gets at I would say a second point related to our opportunity over the next several years. I'm sure everybody saw Toyota pulled 3,000 jobs out of California, flew them over, or SUV'd them through Arizona to make it to Texas, where they added 4,000 jobs in total earlier this week, or they're going to add. The thing in the stories that I saw that I found most interesting was not necessarily what Texas did to draw them, but what Governor Brown's response in California was about losing them. And it was, yeah, everybody knows we have a lot of taxes, we have a lot of regulations, we have a lot of red tape, but the people that know what they're doing, the smart people, figure out a way to do business here anyway. And I think for Arizona, it needs to be looking, what are the ways that we can slice through our, whatever red tape there may be, and there's not as much, but there is some, and the regulations and the taxes, the tax package of this year, so that those small businesses that don't know how to figure out how to get around it can find prosperity and success here. And then let's make that brand that we can sell to companies that want to, especially small companies that are going to leave California, stop here, don't go to Texas.
Jenna, what would you say to that? What would you say that we need to do to create that kind of infrastructure?
I think there's a lot of opportunity going into the new administration and the upcoming election season for the business community to get more engaged than they have in the past. And most of you are probably familiar with the U.S. Supreme Court decision called Citizens United that said that corporations, businesses, trade associations have the right to engage in, they have the free speech rights to engage in political advocacy to a limited extent, but it can't be their primary purpose. But I think it's a real opportunity for the chambers and for businesses to make their voices heard during the election cycle. And I think that can really have an impact. We actually made a small tweak. It's a little nerdy on the policy front, but I think for this audience it's important to mention because this year we worked with Secretary Bennett and actually ended up getting a clarification that would make it easier for trade associations such as the Chamber to make sure that they can, in fact, stay independent with all the board members and politically connected folks associated with the chambers. There was some question under Arizona's previous definition of independent expenditure, whether that could be done. So that will free up the options there. And I think that it's important to put our collective business community voice behind those candidates that we feel understand the business issues. I mean, it's important to look at Senator McComish, for example, and no wonder he got the Sentinel Award, having come from his Ahwatukee Chamber background. And some of those things are invaluable to have a member who understands your industry, your business. So I would just throw out a challenge to the folks in the room on candidate recruitment, to talk about looking at candidates, and it's already too late for this cycle, of course, but looking at the
We have
pipeline.
a few special sessions coming up.
Exactly. Looking at the pipeline of people and encouraging people in your industry to get involved.
Mr.
And
President.
I'm at www.andytobin.com.
Okay, for those of you, I said everything was off the record, but that happens worthy of a yellow sheet. Mr. President, you're going to be around the next 4 years. What would you see as things that you think from a business policy that needs to be tackled?
Well, I appreciate you saying I'll be around for the next 4 years. That's really good news for me. But I think that in my mind, what needs to happen is obviously communication with the business community, whether it be the chambers or individual businesses that come in, because we get a lot of that. But I think what I hear is we want to continue fighting the regulatory front. We need to reduce regulation. I think that we want to tackle a kind of a simplified tax. We need to simplify our tax code. We now have, I can't remember what the number is, Kevin, of special exemptions that we provide with some of these taxes. And I think that if we simplify our tax code, reduce it, and I will just say this, we had a proposal to come in late in the session to reduce certain taxes that would have had an impact over years, many tens of millions of dollars in reduction. I'm okay with that. That particular tax, however, was a static tax. And that is to say, it will not generate any dynamic impact of increased revenue. The problem with that is nobody wanted to cut spending at a concomitant level. So if you're going to reduce taxes over here that don't have a dynamic impact, you're going to have to reduce tax. You're going to have to reduce spending over here. So those are areas that we need to be looking at as state legislators. Is how can we balance that budget so the state gets a good credit rating, the state looks sound on a budget standpoint. So we look stable, and so we can create that same stable environment for business. And so those two areas of regulation tax, I think we need to have that budget side impact as well.
Mr. Speaker, I know you're likely to be in Washington, D.C. when all this happens over the next 4 years, but let's talk about from your perspective on what you've seen and what we need to do.
Well, there's an awful lot of conversation about education and Arizona's ranking in funding for education. My staff put together a chart, and I'll be happy to get it out to the chamber so you can see. If you see what we have done now in the last 3 years, we're almost $200 million in K-12 this year alone. And if you see where that chart has moved from the high point in the Politano years while we were overspending, and then of course the huge cuts to government that we had to have, I think it's compelling to look at a Republican majority who has reinforced the education, which is our workforce development, whether it be TEDs or community colleges, but especially the K-12 numbers. I think we're only about $120 million off or $160 million off of where we were, at the peak of the Politano funding. People don't see that. Those are significant investments in education. And I think I'd like to see the dynamic change. We can't print money like they can in Washington, and hopefully they'll stop doing that. But if you look at how we've managed to move Arizona from in the bottom to, now Forbes has got us ranked, number 1 over the next 10 years in job growth. With the economic development package we have had systematically over the last 4 years, I think that is a compelling success story for the majority and how they continue to look at true education reform and how we are putting those dollars into our schools. And I think that's part of our branding, to say that this is a place where we care. So between that and our infrastructure costs in investment. I think we're starting to move in the right direction, and I think that's the good news, that we're not getting out where the press just doesn't want it to get.
So, Jana, that's a very good segue into this question. And the question being that what role should business leadership play with policymakers in framing a strong education policy? I know there's been a lot of debate over academic standards, but what is a positive role that we can play and we can work together to affect a better outcome for our public schools?
I agree with, I appreciate Speaker Tobin raising it in terms of the funding levels, because that is always a constant criticism. But I want to focus just for a second more on some of the results and looking at what the business community can do working with policymakers, and just throw out a couple of examples that happened this past session. One stat that I want to throw out that I'm going to read, because it's so bad that if I say it out loud, you'll think I'm making it up. But the Board of Regents came out with a study during the fall that looked at, in a 6-year period, how Arizona high schools were doing in terms of getting their graduates to complete a college degree within that 6-year period. And Arizona has 466 high schools, and over half, 240 high schools, had less than 5% of their graduates get college degrees. And just 32 high schools out of the 466 graduated half of, were responsible for turning out half of the graduates. So you wonder, what are the other 434 schools producing? And the question that I have for the business community is, are the students coming out prepared with the skills that you need? And I know there's a debate about not college isn't necessarily the path for everyone, but are we recognizing that, and are we treating that appropriately and training them with the skills that you need for workers in your businesses? And then just to tie that back around to some of the efforts from this session, for example, I happen to serve on the State Board for Charter Schools, and we are facing, if a school has been categorized as a D school for 3 years, then they are determined to be a failing school, and they're subject to closure by the State Board. Well, the burden on staff, a very limited staff, of going through all the administrative hoops to close down those 37 failing schools is very large. So there was an effort towards the end of the session to require automatic closure of those schools. And I will say this is not unique to a district, to a charter. There are 60-some district schools that are also expected to have F scores. So I think the point for the business community is that we really need to get engaged in the front end of some of these decisions, even though they're tough. I think what we're learning in the charter world, at least, is to look at the best practices of the schools that are having good performance and trying to let those replicate, let those grow, and learn from those. And for the people who aren't getting the results, let's stop throwing the state tax dollars at those schools, and let's push everything over to a more productive direction.
Okay, we're getting very close to the end, so what we'd like to do is do a quick lightning round. And the way I'm going to describe it is as 1- or 2-word answers. So members, there's no explaining your votes. Janet, this is not a deposition. And Scott, just don't do what you do. Just 1- or 2-word answers.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. And I get to be very John McLaughlin-esque, so I can say whether you're right or wrong after these answers. Okay, so if you could sum up this year's legislative session in 1 or 2 words, what would it be? I'll go with you, Mr. Speaker. It's difficult, isn't it?
Andy Biggs.
President Biggs.
Mercurial.
Mercurial. Scott Seeley.
Productive.
That's by a true lobbyist. Janet.
Pleasantly fast.
The right answer is Janet Day. In your opinion, and I'll start with you, Jana, what would be one of the biggest issues that we're going to see in the legislative session for 2015?
Education reform.
Mr. Seeley.
I agree. Jan's correct.
Mr. Speaker.
I'm hoping it's lands and mining.
Mr. President.
It's going to be education reform and budget.
Wrong. CPS, because it's always CPS. Okay, I'll start with you, Mr. President. What's going to be the relationship between the legislature and the new governor?
It depends.
Mr. Speaker, you're here, so you can answer that.
It's going to be wonderful.
Janet? Yes.
I'm stuck.
Scott?
Interesting.
Interesting. Wrong. The answer is, I've worked for 2 governors. They're always contentious. Okay, so now we're going to get to the question everybody here wants to know. And I'll start with Mr. Seeley. Who's going to be the governor in 2015?
I know.
State treasurer, you see.
Janet Day.
I'm going to jump the line. Ken Bennett.
President.
I'm sure we'll be able to work with whoever it is.
1 or 2 word answers, Mr. President. No explaining the votes. I'll remind you of the rules. Wrong. The answer is all of the above. So ladies and gentlemen, can you please give a big round of applause to our esteemed panel? So I have the privilege now of introducing 2 gentlemen whom you all know as the Singing Senators. But their moniker is going to change because next year one of them is going to become the Rocking Representative and the other one